What's going on, everybody, and welcome back into the channel. Brenden Schaeffer here with you, ready to rock and roll on another fantasy football mock draft. And today I'm thinking about going into this one with a little bit of a specific strategy. I want to go zero RB. It's something that I have found myself doing a lot in recent years when it comes to PPR drafts in particular. And I want to give it a test drive on this episode, and I want to try to stick to it. Now, the way the draft board may unfold could change the plan, but I want to try to stick to this from the 5 spot in a 12-team PPR. I want to try and demonstrate what a zero RB draft could look like this year. I do think generally my ultimate strategy as I go through these mock drafts through the month of August is going to land somewhere closer to not even necessarily a hero RB strategy, but just one where you prioritize the running back position maybe once within the first 3 rounds or so. Get a look at the different guys that I could be compelled by in another episode. It won't be happening in today's mock draft. But guys like Bijan Robinson in the first round and Nick Chubb in the early second, I'm intrigued by. A little further down the board, I like Tony Pollard. Depends on where he lands. And Jahmyr Gibbs is another guy that I'm intrigued by when you get to maybe round 3, round 4, depending on how aggressive your league is in drafting some of these guys. But today I'm going to try to go, let's say, till the 6th round before drafting my first running back. And I'm hoping, as a result of that, that I will have accomplished a really good wide receiver core, because we're looking at the settings here in this league, and it's going to be a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex league. So I'm thinking I want to go 4 wide receiver. Filling those two flex spots is going to be the plan. And in so doing, I also would like to be able to have a quality quarterback or tight end. Probably not both. I think it's overkill to get both in the early rounds, but that's the game plan. 4 good wide receivers and an elite tight end or quarterback is the plan for the first 5 rounds. I chose to do this experiment from somewhere in the middle of the draft board. We're going from the 5 spot. Let's see how that pans out. Going to kick things off here. Was hoping maybe the opportunity would come to go Travis Kelce in the first round, because that would resolve my tight end situation. But he goes number 2 overall, certainly earlier than I've ever seen him go. And I cannot wait until we get toward the end of August and a lot of those redraft leagues begin drafting. I really don't think there's a lot of a choice that the computer on Sleeper left me here, though, because Jamar Chase has got to be the pick. I like him as probably the second best player in PPR. Right behind Justin Jefferson. I think I'd take Chase over Kelce. And I'd certainly take him over both of the running backs because of the way I like to build teams. It's wide receiver heavy, so that's the way we're going to start this draft off here. I really like that from the 5 spot. Was not anticipating that and don't necessarily think it's something that could happen in a real draft. But here we are in this one. A little bit of a long wait, and oh my goodness, we almost had a shot at Amon-Ra St. Brown at the 2.8. I don't think there's any way he slips to 2.7 when you get into real drafts. I've been taking him with regularity at the top of the second round, I should say, in the 2.1 to 2.3 range. I'd even take him in the first round, depending on whether CeeDee Lamb was off the board. But I'd take him over A.J. Brown, I think. Very high on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mentioned that in every podcast that I get a chance to do. But now we're looking here in the second round, and we still want to keep in mind the wide receiver heavy build that we're shooting for. Quarterback doesn't look all too compelling. Josh Allen, you could go that route. I just don't think I want to do it. I think I want to beef up at wide receiver. Could go Mark Andrews at tight end, but I've seen him fall to the 3rd. So we'll wait a little bit on tight end, and it leaves us basically Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, some good examples of players here, so we get a better look at the draft board with the players available. I'm thinking Jalen Waddle or Olave. I kind of like the idea of Chris Olave matched up with Derek Carr, who throws a better deep ball than people think. Devontae Adams had a really good season last year as a result of his pairing with Derek Carr. So it's really kind of a pick your poison situation, and Olave is the number 1 on his team. Jalen Waddle is not. And that's kind of generally a good way to go with it, but Jalen Waddle on an explosive Dolphins offense is so good. I think these guys are a coin flip for me. They're really the only 2 I'm considering at this point. Mentioned that we're going 0 RBs, so we're not really looking. Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard is decent value perhaps, but that's not the way we want to do it. I'm having a hard time, but ultimately, when you're on the clock, you got to make a decision you can live with. Going to draft Jalen Waddle because I trust that Dolphins offense more than I do that of the Saints. As we get a look at the draft board flying off now, didn't really work out for us with Mark Andrews. So we take a look at our roster here real quick. We've got an opportunity to stack 2 good wide receivers right off the top. Do a little quick editing on the fly there. Nobody noticed that. We like our wide receivers the way we started off. Unfortunately, we do not get a chance to go Mark Andrews in the 3rd. In opportunities where that is an available option, I really like taking it. But at this point, we don't have it. So we look back to the wide receiver room, or do we go in the 3rd round with a quarterback? I think it's a little bit early to go quarterback based on who's still left on the board. Jalen Hurts would have been a fine pick here, but I don't really feel comfortable with that. Again, this is a reason that I like going kind of 0 RB. None of the running backs right here are all too compelling to me. Jahmyr Gibbs would be the one, and it would be a little bit of a reach in the early 3rd. He usually lasts till the mid to late 3rd. But sometimes if you just say, hey, I want to get my guy, and I happen to be fortunate or unfortunate enough to draw the 5th spot in the draft, it's completely within your rights to take Jahmyr Gibbs there. Do you and have a fantasy draft you can feel good about. But I really like what I see again at wide receiver. And if I could start this way in a real draft, it would be so compelling because Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith are kind of birds of a feather. First of all, both Alabama guys, but really it boils down to they're the number 2 on their team, but their team projects to have a really, really good passing offense. So it doesn't scare me to have 2 number 2 guys in their own offense on my fantasy team behind Jamar Chase, who is definitively a number 1. So comparing it to like Calvin Ridley's probably the one for his team. Maybe that's a good pick. Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf has got a lot of traffic in Seattle to deal with. I feel so good about just taking the top guy off the board at the wide receiver position, which is Devontae Smith. Really feel good about that. So we take the look at our roster. Chase, Waddle, Smith, youth, upside, athleticism, all things that I really like to go for when I'm looking to build a wide receiver core. I've got no problem with the way the rest of the round unfolded, right? Like Ridley goes a full round later. That was a consideration, but he was further down the draft board. You can get Calvin Ridley in the 4th if you're looking to buy in on him as the alpha in that Jacksonville passing offense with Trevor Lawrence. Would have been great to get him in the late 4th. We would have smashed the button, I think, right here. And taking a look at the board, this could be Justin Fields' time. This could be where we go get our quarterback, because if we don't, do we feel good about Herbert and Lawrence getting back to us? Not necessarily. And at that point, if we don't get any of those guys, Lawrence probably does, but I don't really want to take him in the mid-5th. Justin Herbert, I would take at 5.5. I think he'd be really compelling at that spot. But is it a reach to go Justin Fields here? Not really. I think I prefer Fields to Burrow, honestly. And Lamar Jackson or Fields, you can kind of take your pick. One is just a younger version of the other, and I feel like Justin Fields has the weapons now with DJ Moore. That's something that if you're lucky enough to be at like 411 and you still see DJ Moore, or on the turn at the 412, is even more of a guarantee. You still see DJ Moore and Justin Fields on the board. That's a stack that again, you don't ever want to force stacks, but I like that one if it falls into your lap. Joe Mixon is not a guy I'm going to take here because I said I'm going 0 RB. But Joe Mixon in the late 4th, because of the workload that I project for him in a top offense, he's kind of being left for dead a little bit. I found myself taking him in this spot in another mock recently. I'm not going to do it today, but I wanted to make mention of it. The choices really for me are DJ Moore or Justin Fields. I'm hoping to end up with both of them. But I'm going to take the quarterback because there are other wide receivers on the board. And you see Justin Herbert go. We would have been pretty disappointed if we would have ended up missing out on Herbert after making it a goal to grab a elite quarterback in the first 5 rounds. When you go 0 RB, you allow yourself to open up such possibilities. And then doesn't the draft board just fall beautifully for us? Take a look at the player list. I mean, here are the wide receivers that would be in consideration here. We're sticking with our plan to draft 4 of them in the first 5 rounds. But DJ Moore is sitting right there above the line, and he is our stack with Justin Fields. So that's who we're going to take here. But just evaluating some of the other options in this range, I love Tyler Lockett, have for years. You hear me say it in almost every video. But it's like I don't end up drafting a ton of them because the way I am approaching a lot of drafts this year, I'm loading up on wide receiver early and enjoying the mid-round value at running back a little better than I think people do in most years. So I'm looking at Tyler Lockett down there going, he's probably not going to land on this team unless he falls and I have to take him for a pure value play. But he'd be your fifth wide receiver. But others like Christian Watson, Jerry Jeudy are attractive to me. In a vacuum, maybe I'd pick one of them. But DJ Moore is who I'm picking because I love that stack with Justin Fields. I would start any draft this way. If you told me I could end up with this roster kicking off a draft, I would do that 10 times out of 10. Really, really like it the way this is lining up. Justin Fields as an elite quarterback we got within the first 5 rounds. Wide receiver core, young, upside, athleticism, all of it. Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, DJ Moore. I feel like this is possible to do. I feel like this is possible. It's probably unlikely that Devontae Smith falls to the third round, the middle of the third, I should say, like the 3.5 spot. That's maybe not as likely. But Waddle into the mid to late second, or Amon-Ra St. Brown in that spot, Garrett Wilson get into that spot. If you get any one of those guys drafting from the 5 spot and you loop back around to the 2.8, I feel like that's a win. I feel really good about this draft. But now we do have to start on running back. That is a position that counts as well. But I like the way this sets up. Here's the reason I do this year. We'll give you a look at the rosters. That's not what I meant to click. Player list. I want to show you the running backs I'm considering here. I like Rachaad White. I like Pacheco. White a little less because he's going to be in an offense that I project to not be very good. But Pacheco, he's going to be in the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes-led offense. Expected to be ready by week 1, so I'm not too concerned about the injury. Maybe you get him on a discount as a result. But I still see a name below his that I'm thinking, I'm taking that guy every single time. I still can't understand, and misclick there. I still can't understand why it's a situation where Javonte Williams is going 3-4 rounds behind Breece Hall when Javonte Williams is getting rave reviews about where he is in his recovery from his knee injury. I don't get it. I get it, I guess, from the perspective of one has Aaron Rodgers and the other has Russell Wilson, but one has Sean Payton. I think the Broncos are going to be better. Tempted to take James Cook here, but we could play the ADP game a little bit with him, and if we don't get him, there are other running backs we like. So we're going to slam Javonte Williams as our our running back 1. It's a scary thought. But again, I think we can find enough depth in this group of running backs that we could end up making out of it with a pretty good group. Making it from this draft with like 4 that we feel pretty good about throwing into our lineup within the first couple weeks if need be. David Montgomery actually listed as the starter right now for the Lions at running back. Don't really care about that. He'll split it with Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think Gibbs is probably more explosive. So that's why I like Gibbs, and I think it's reasonable to draft Gibbs at where he's going. Just wasn't the game plan for this draft. But I'm gonna put some of these guys in queue. David Montgomery, James Cook could be our draft pick right here. We're talking PPR leagues, so don't mind Antonio Gibson either, but he's not a pick at this spot. And we like Isaiah Pacheco. To me, the choice is James Cook with this draft pick. Again, youth, upside, the potential for his role to expand. We haven't heard anything about James Cook in Buffalo Bills camp that isn't positive in nature of, he's going to be a guy that can be a 3-down back for us. He's going to, and this is maybe the best offense in football. Explosive with Josh Allen. So James Cook's going to be my pick, but makes sense to take a little bit more clock to make sure that we are aware of all the running backs that we don't want to forget about later on. I want to tag Zach Charbonnet. I mentioned that the Lions guys, I do think that it's reasonable to have Jahmyr Gibbs several rounds before Montgomery, even though Montgomery's a fine pick where he's going. But in the case of the Seattle backfield, with the injury to Kenneth Walker, even without the injury, I feel like he's going too early relative to his backfield mate because Charbonnet could very well take that thing and be a factor. So he's a guy that we're hoping to pick up later on, but we're going to go ahead and slam James Cook here and then move on with the draft. We'll see what else unfolds and pops out. click off the player list for you guys now that we've identified what we're looking for at the running back position. Mentioned Tyler Lockett. He went right about where he should, too, 7.3. In drafts where I'm drafting 7.3 and I need a fourth wide receiver, I love to pick Lockett there, but that's not the way we're approaching this one. Let's take a look at where things stand now. Let's look at our roster real quick. Get a closer look at that. This is what I'm talking about. I like the way this lays out. Are we robust at running back? Of course not. But the value and the upside that we got in the running backs that we did pick, I feel like there's a lot there. I feel like there's a lot of value there. But now we're in a spot where, do you like tight end? Not really. Usually find myself waiting on tight end. We're going to do it again here. Running back would make the most sense, but we're starting to fill out our bench now, so I don't mind drafting an upside wide receiver. Gabe Davis, Zay Flowers are a couple guys that are interesting. Cortland Sutton could be interesting. Obviously, don't need a quarterback. A little bit of an ADP game. Like, I feel like I'm going to get the two guys I want. And maybe I'm reaching. I want to check Devon A-Chain while I see him here on my screen. Make sure that that's a guy that I'm keeping in mind for later on. I don't know right now. I'm thinking running back makes the most sense because Zach Charbonnet is a guy that we like. Antonio Gibson, the reason I don't go him is I think he's more of a floor guy than a ceiling. He could have a good ceiling, but his floor I like a lot. That's why I check him here. But we're not going to take him because when you're going for a bench bat, you're looking for upside. Gabe Davis is a guy that I'm interested in. Zay Flowers. Will Charbonnet make it to us? That's the wager that we'd be placing. More pieces of that Buffalo Bills offense would be attractive. We're going to take Gabe Davis and take a shot here. We're hoping to get Charbonnet on the way back. If we don't, we could really load up at wide receiver and get Zay Flowers. Both of them fall. Both of them available at this pick. Zay Flowers might have been the better pick than Gabe Davis because he could be the number one in Lamar Jackson's offense this year. I'm really high on Zay Flowers. And it's good to do these mock drafts because you can find yourself in a spot where you go, man, I really wish I could take Zay Flowers in the 9th round right now. I like the idea of the value of that pick. So you can kind of reverse engineer, okay, what's the draft that I've put together to this point that's putting me in a spot where I'm not really able to comfortably do that? Well, it's the fact that we've only got 2 running backs. That should be obvious enough, right? But I don't hate the value I've gotten in any previous round. I feel good about all those things. Let's take a look here. See if I can scroll up to the beginning of the draft board so we can get a look at everything. I mean, Team 4 taking 5 running backs in a row. You also got to look in these mock drafts at the things that aren't going to happen when you get into a real one. But they just continued to take the value. Team 4 taking all those running backs. Maybe we take one of those instead at some point. But we didn't have a shot at Eckler. I didn't want Jacobs, and we didn't have a shot at Stevenson. I didn't want Mixon. So you can go all the way down the list and realize, even if you didn't find yourself dead set on going 0 RB coming into a draft like this, it just broke down in a way that makes sense. But if there was a spot to grab a running back previously that could have set us up a little bit differently, maybe you take that route. Maybe you take Tony Pollard in the 2nd. And so everything slides down. Instead of getting Smith in the 3rd, as your 3rd wide receiver, you get him as your 2nd wide receiver. There's a lot of different things that could have happened. We're going to take Charbonnet because I feel like I like him in a run-first Pete Carroll offense in case something should happen to Kenneth Walker, and even if nothing does. But Flowers is a guy that I would really like to target in the early to mid-9th. He ends up going 9.7 in this draft. That's a pick I'd love to be able to make. And maybe the answer, like I said, was just don't take the number 2 for the Bills. Take the potential number 1 for the Ravens, and instead of having 2 Bills on your team. If I do that draft 100 times and I start the exact same way and I'm faced with that pick in the 8th round, Gabe Davis or Zay Flowers, I probably take Zay Flowers a decent amount of time. But Zay Flowers ends up dropping a whole additional round. It's just kind of a weird spot. Like, you're not technically getting great value if you're talking about 3 guys that you got the first two with ease, and the third one didn't go till 9.7, and you could have taken any of them at 8.8 and then coming back at 9.5. But that's what I really like about the way this one's setting up. And it may not go this way in a real draft, but I'm not looking at Pat Freiermuth. I'm not looking at Michael Thomas. I explained my thoughts on Gibson. Not looking at Brian Robinson because he doesn't catch enough passes. Juju. Quentin Johnston's kind of interesting. There were 8 picks between my 2 picks, and only one of those guys I'm thinking, Quentin Johnston, that's kind of interesting. So drafts going that way really sets up for you. Don't worry about, yes, pay attention to ADP, but that's kind of the point I was looking to make is don't be married to it if everybody that happens to be between the 2 picks that you're making are guys you don't want. That's just a benefit to you. All right. Sky Moore is interesting to me here. I don't know if he gets back to us. I'm not 100% sure if he gets back to us. Got to think about this one a little bit. And don't have a lot of time to do it. 16 seconds. Devon Achane is another guy that we said he could be our 4th running back. That's probably the way to do it, right? Take your shot at another running back and hope that things behind you pan out. I love Jamison Williams, but he's suspended. Yeah, that panned out really nicely. Sky Moore is going to rise up draft boards. He's starting in 2 wide sets right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. For those who are unaware, that is Patrick Mahomes' team. It's the one he plays for. So I'm just going to slam Sky Moore here and look at the board as it unfolds to see if I made a mistake. McKinnon, Daniel Jones, Elijah Mitchell, Russell Wilson, Jacoby Myers, Tyler Higbee, Rashee Rice, who came up a little injured in camp within the last day or two, makes us even more appreciate the Sky Moore pick. Thielen, Boyd, Mooney, Algier, Rondale Moore. Sam Laporte is the one that we were going to take here. He's always my late round tight end grab. But I think I'd rather take my shot on Sky Moore, honestly. And maybe we'll just take a couple of random tight ends at the end. Kendre Miller is interesting. I'm actually going to take Tank Bigsby. I haven't taken him in any mock drafts. And since we did go 0 RB, he's getting some good praise out of the Jacksonville camp. He's a guy rising up boards for me right now. So I feel good about that. Nico Collins could be the number 1 for Houston, but we do need a tight end. We'll finish it out with a tight end to not get too crazy. I don't know if Michael Mayer is the right pick, but rookie tight end, safety blanket for Jimmy Garoppolo, we could see it coming that way. We could see that happening. And that's our draft, but man, I feel really good about this one. This is one I definitely feel good about. Go 0 RB. Get yourself a strategy that you feel good about going in. Get yourself a couple of strategies from each potential draft spot so that you kind of know what to expect and you've practiced it before. That's why we're doing these mock drafts. Subscribe if you like the video, if you like fantasy content, and if you've got a particular style of league and mock that you would like for me to run, heck, you can even run it with me. Send me a DM at bschaefer12 on Twitter. On Sleeper, I'll get some people in these as I get more time to prioritize this channel, but the mock drafts will be coming. The regular fantasy content during the season is the plan. So hit that subscribe button if you enjoy this type of content. I feel pretty good about going into a fantasy football season with my running back core, knowing it was a 0 RB draft. And my running back core is Javonte Williams, James Cook, Zach Charbonnet, Devon Achane, and Tank Bigsby. A lot of rookies, but that's the way your bench should look, in my opinion. Take shots on guys that have upside. The oldest player on this roster is probably like 24 years old. But those are the kinds of people that thrive in fantasy. DJ Moore is probably the oldest guy on the team. Was he 25? Maybe 26? Let me know what you think of this draft. Let me know if this is something that you think could work in a real draft. Or if I'm going to get into a draft room and suddenly all these guys that I picked up are gone 2 rounds earlier. Those things happen, but it's good to prepare. So we took a shot with this. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening. And that's a wrap for this video on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Peace.